There's news in the NFL today, and it's time to break it down in the only way we know how. Hot Route style.
Earl! Johnny!
With our spin on football headlines with a mix of frozen tundras.
Let's be a cold weather team.
Neck rolls.
Boom!
And grass-stained jerseys.
The good old-fashioned guts was probably the biggest difference in the game.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to Hot Routes, joined as always by Matthew Coller of the Purple Insider podcast. And we are picking up right where we left off through the playoff narrative here. And Matthew, what a call by you, my man, at the end of last week's show, saying, look out for that Buffalo Bills kicker. I don't know about him. And sure enough, that was one of the main differences in that game. So a tip of the cap to you, my friend. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay. My friends and family in Buffalo, where I grew up, are not doing okay after what happened. But yes, if you go back and look in the final minutes, you said, all right, well, that's it for our show. Anything else you want to add? And I said, beware the Bills kicker. And was prophetic. He ends up missing wide right. And just before the kick, I remembered what we had talked about. And I was watching the game with my wife. And just before the kick, I looked at her and I said, he's missing this kick. And she was like, did you see it on Twitter? I showed her my Twitter. No, I haven't got any updates on Twitter. I stand up, go to the television, and it's wide right. You know why? Because I grew up in Buffalo and I live in Minnesota. And I just expect that those two franchises will miss every key field goal. But the dude was definitely shook in that Pittsburgh game after having the kick blocked and then missing one really weirdly at the end. So when he missed it, it was not a terrible shock. But of course, if he just, Stephon Diggs catches a ball or he throws it underneath to Diggs, there's going to be a million, hey, if only this other thing happened. Very much like the Scott Norwood wide right that cost the Bills a Super Bowl once upon a time. But what a freaking weekend of football it was, Marcus. It was great.
It absolutely was great. And yes, if anyone would know about wide right kicks, it would certainly be you and your background. A whole weekend of games with missed opportunities. Honestly, felt like most of the games had those kind of coulda, shoulda, woulda moments throughout most of these games. So as we recap the weekend here, we're gonna go through game by game. Then we're gonna preview what's coming up, and then assuming we have time, I want to talk a little bit about some of these hirings, especially the Titans have hired Brian Callahan as their head coach. Another one just came out before the show. The Raiders have hired Tom Telesco as their general manager. That's an interesting one. But let's focus on the games to start. And I actually want to work backwards from what we watched and start with that Sunday night game, Kansas City at Buffalo, that totally lived up to the hype. And my biggest takeaway from this one is Patrick Mahomes is just inevitable, man. It is the Thanos meme. I am inevitable. And I kind of had the take last year that Mahomes is the best quarterback that has ever played. It's only a matter of time before he is the consensus GOAT. I think this is just another step towards that. What is it? 6 straight AFC championship appearances, has not missed a championship weekend since he's been the starting quarterback for the Chiefs. And even in a year where receivers are dropping balls, they can't get on the same page, playoffs come around and he bunkers down and plays literally perfect from start to finish. And the Bills did a good job to kind of have that game plan of we're going to keep the ball, we're going to have this huge time of possession advantage. We're going to run short gains, a bunch of first downs, and I just try to keep them cold, try to keep them off. And it just didn't matter because every time they touched the ball, it felt like they went down and scored. Just patient, finding the holes, accurate, you name it. Just what a day for Patrick Mahomes and his legacy. What else you got to add on this one, Matthew?
Well, I think that the terrifying thing about Patrick Mahomes is that he has gotten so much better at executing an offense and dealing with the shortcomings of an offense. Because when he came into the league, it was physical gifts, it was doing wild stuff, it was running around. And, there's the Mahomes meme of like, oh, if Mahomes did it, everybody would retweet it a million times or whatever. But that's the type of quarterback that he was just this crazy playmaker, throw it deep down the field, MLB caliber arm, launching crazy passes to Tyreek Hill. And now when I watch him, I'm like, dude, that's Brady. That is what Tom Brady looked like in the playoffs so many times. Take what the defense gives you, execute the offense. You can draw up anything, all sorts of different reads. You could throw short, underneath, intermediate. And then when you need that one play, when you need that one scramble, or when you need that one throw into traffic or wild off schedule, has to dodge 2 or 3 guys coming his way, he can make it happen. But it's not all that he does to make it happen. And I feel like there was kind of a come to the football gods moment for them against the Raiders with Patrick Mahomes, because that was one of those games where he was trying to do all the crazy scramble stuff. And since then, we haven't seen that. And I don't know if it's an adjustment from him, if it's an adjustment from the offense, the other players, if there was a big, get together from everybody. So we got to figure this out right now. But that's what Andy Reid has done many times, reinventing this thing with Patrick Mahomes. And now the fact that he can just line up under center and execute an offense by reading the defense, by setting the right guys in motion, putting the right checks, get everybody organized and all that to go along with his other skills. This isn't going anywhere, because that's like the way you can survive the longevity in the NFL. And I agree with you that, he doesn't have the most accomplishments yet. He's on his way to that, but he is the best player to ever play this position and the most unstoppable. And it kind of made me think about the myth of parity in the NFL. Everybody goes into the season with this idea that, oh, anybody could win it, anything could happen. And yet, let's go over the last 25 years, maybe even just history in general. In the 80s, you've got Joe Montana. In the 90s, it's a couple of different quarterbacks, but you see, John Elway and Troy Aikman. And then you get into the 2000s, and it's entirely Brady, Manning, Roethlisberger. And here we are, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes again. And I know a lot of people rail against QB wins being used as a metric, but I'm going to tell you, I don't think it's a real coincidence that the absolute best quarterback of any decade just wins like crazy. And that's what Patrick Mahomes does. And he's back. And I don't have any answer. If you couldn't stop this team from getting to the AFC Championship, the weakest team by a million miles that Mahomes has had around him, I don't know what you're supposed to do for the next how many years to slow this man down.
Yeah, really well said. And it is so gut-wrenching for the Bills for that point you just said, where this was a huge opportunity. They've had big opportunities, but this year it was like they got him at home. They had the right game script. They were like 2-1 in time of possession. They even won the turnover battle in this game, and it still wasn't enough. And it's not like they played bad either, right? Like they missed the kick in the end. This game was neck and neck. Just a really long offseason ahead, I think, for the Buffalo Bills. I want to talk a little bit about their future. Like they're not screwed as long as they have Josh Allen. They're going to have a chance, but like you're looking at this thing with this Stephon Diggs situation. Did not think he played well in this game. Did not think he played well for the last half of the year. You have to deal with that. They have pending free agents, and you're looking at this conference next year. Rodgers is coming back. Joe Burrow is coming back. For them to have looked back on the last 4 years and not gotten this thing done, it's really quite devastating. So my heart does go out for you, Bills fans. I had dug up a tweet from a few months ago. I can't remember what game it was from, but the Bills lost just a heartbreaking game. I think it was through special teams or something. I was like, the Bills really are the AFC Packers, talking about like the Aaron Rodgers Packers after they had won that Super Bowl. And to see them miss that kick, it's just like, as someone that grew up watching those years, every year it was like, we gotta get it done this year. Like every year you have those expectations, and for it to fall short again, my heart goes out for you. I know that pain as well as anyone.
I know that nobody has any tears for the Packers or the New Orleans Saints for that matter, because they have Super Bowls and had all-time great quarterbacks, but it does feel similar even to Drew Brees after his Super Bowl, where they lose an insane game in the divisional round to San Francisco 2011. They lose the Minneapolis Miracle game. They lose the game where Kyle Rudolph catches it in the back of the end zone. They lose the no pass interference game. They lose the Jared Cook fumbling game. And you go, well, this was not Drew Brees' fault at any point. And the same thing goes for, a Seattle Seahawks onside kick or a blocked punt or whatever, the number of differences between Aaron Rodgers getting back to the Super Bowl and not. Maybe his coach kicking a field goal instead of letting him go for it on fourth down against Tampa Bay. I mean, we just have this long list, and it really shows you how insanely hard it is. But I think what Patrick Mahomes does to teams and has done to the Bills is he just makes one fewer mistake than you do. And I always felt that way about Tom Brady. It was like, if the other team just opens the door a crack, he's going to take full advantage of it. And that's like the Atlanta, they're up 28-3, but they get a holding call and they don't get another field goal. And you just like, uh-oh, here it comes, because that's who he is. Like, the best players not only have the highest end, but they also make the fewest number of mistakes. And there's crazy numbers about how few turnovers, how few turnover worthy plays, how few fumbles, how few interceptions that Patrick Mahomes has. And their team, fumbled out of the back of the end zone hilariously on one play. But aside from that, like, their quarterback didn't make any mistakes. And, brought up in the comments section, they're really good defense, but their defense was not having their best day against Josh Allen. He was doing all sorts of stuff against them. And yet still Mahomes finds a way to overcome even that when his defense doesn't have the best day, which you almost always have to do if you're going to get to the Super Bowl. But to your point about the Bills, going forward here, their cap situation, the age of some of their key players, it's very hard to say that Stephon Diggs is ever going to go back to being a top 5 receiver. He did not look anything like the Stephon Diggs from even a year ago, but especially not a couple of years ago. And where do they go from here to build around this monstrosity of a contract that Josh Allen has? It feels like, I mentioned New Orleans with Drew Brees. They had those setback years before they drafted Kamara, Ramczyk, Lattimore, Thomas. Like, they might have the same type of deal where they have to take a little bit of a step back, build through the draft around Josh Allen, because they're not going to have a whole heck of a lot of money to spend.
Yeah. Do you think McDermott's going to be on the hot seat a little bit next year? You think it's finally time that's a legitimate, hot seat? I think he did a good job with the defense, but this was another year, even though they had all these injuries, and that's a legitimate excuse, you're still sitting here. 27 points is a little more than you'd like, even if it's against the Chiefs. But Chiefs had plenty of losses this year where they couldn't put up 27 points. I think they just are running out of answers. And I just don't see this getting over the hump, with McDermott. Can we, for me, just rip the Band-Aid off. We know where this is going eventually. Let's kickstart this thing, get an offensive coach in here and try to spark some life into this. In my opinion, he's gonna be back. But honestly, I would be stunned if McDermott is not fired at the end of next season.
Right, because the writing is on the wall and there's not a lot of ways to fix this thing roster-wise. And if you slip back even a little and miss the playoffs, then McDermott is probably getting fired. He would have if they had missed the playoffs this year, especially with the controversy so strange I don't want to get into it that it was involved with him earlier this year. But it's just, for me, with Sean McDermott, I think he is a good enough coach to win a Super Bowl with. But one of the issues with being a defensive-minded coach is when you have a great offensive coordinator like Brian Daboll, then someone hires him. And then you just have to hope the next guy works out. And this is sort of what happened in Philadelphia, right? They had a great offensive coordinator, and then someone hired him, and the next guy wasn't as good. And it took them half a season to correct their mistake with Ken Dorsey and get Joe Brady in there. And I'm not convinced that Joe Brady is on the same level as Brian Daboll. Not to mention that, receivers wise, if Diggs isn't totally dominant, they have a second option, but it's not like they have 5 other options like some of the best teams in the league. And how do you get those from here? So it does sort of line up for next year being a year that could break Sean McDermott ultimately. But I also think you're this close. You're this close. You're a victim of your own success in a lot of ways. I mean, sort of the famous example of Tony Dungy when he's with the Tampa Bay Bucs, where you have had so much success. He is the most successful Bills head coach other than Marv Levy ever. And yet he set the bar so high and has gotten close so many times that now that ends up putting you on the hot seat just because of the way expectations work, right? You get to the same spot and you're a hero, but now you're a goat in the bad way because you lost this way. And think about,
Yeah.
man, one stop a couple years ago, one field goal goes in the middle instead of to the wide right. We might be talking about Sean McDermott as a genius as opposed to a guy who could get fired soon. But that's football for you, man.
Yeah. And one more thing, I agree with Michael in the chat bringing up the front office. That's another thing I wanted to mention. They just haven't been good enough. This is a front office that always gets repeatedly praised year after year after year. Like, oh, it's a top 5 front office. I'm like, I mean, where's the evidence of that outside of the Stephon Diggs pick and the fact that they made Josh Allen work? You look at this pass rush that they have invested resource after resource after resource. Granted, Von Miller's injury was a part of that, but this is year 2 of Von Miller's contract. That was supposed to be a last year thing. That kind of impact. He's 34 years old and 35 now, I think, actually. But I mean, they had no pass rush. Ed Oliver, who they gave a big contract this offseason, got shut down in this game. Those edge players were nowhere to be found. One of the guys they invested in, Boogie Basham, is off playing in, where did he go? The Giants, I think they shipped him off to. AJ Epinesa hasn't been able to dominate in big games. The lack of pass rush there to support the back end, it's been something on the top of our minds this whole time. Unless they're scheming up stunts or anything, they haven't been able to win there. So you mentioned like that Saints draft, that might be your answer for the Bills, because they're not going to come out and spend a bunch of money. This front office has to come out and prove their worth. They got to find a star receiver in the second round. They got to find a pass rusher in the first round, whatever. And really elevate the roster talent here, because it has definitely not gone in the right direction, and it's not where it was a year ago.
Well, and also, I mean, can we draft some more tight ends here? I mean, look, tight ends to me it's great if you hit on the one like Sam Laporta, but a lot of times it takes them years to develop. And as soon as this team realized that Josh Allen was going to be a top 3 quarterback, taking a position there to be a weapon that's going to take 3 years to develop is not really a great usage. Whereas how many wide receivers do we see as rookies being really good right away? It feels like there was a dozen of them this year who were really good. And you were going into the season with Gabe Davis as your number 2 receiver. When they were at their absolute best as an offense, they had Cole Beasley coming out of the slot. Emmanuel Sanders was kind of washed, but still effective enough. Yeah, right. If when he's playing wide receiver too, they had 4 guys, and in this game it felt like when Diggs dropped the pass, and look, Shakir was very good down the stretch, so they've got a guy there who's helpful, but they really only had kind of 1.5 receivers that they were working with, and you're going to have a lot more than that. And then there's some bad breaks too. There's some bad, like Tre'Davious White was one of the top 5 corners in the league and just has had 2 catastrophic injuries, and there's not a whole lot you could do about that. But I agree. I mean, they've let the roster slip from where it was a couple of years ago, and this was pretty much just Josh Allen throwing a team on his back, John Elway style, in the mid 80s, but it's usually not enough to ask somebody to do that.
Yeah. Yep. And this I keep coming up with points because there's so much on this game. This game was not on Josh Allen at all. So like to Des Bryant, who's out here saying we got to get Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis out of here because of a screenshot of one missed read at the end of the game. Like, you're out of your gourd. Josh Allen was fantastic in this game. Like you said, if Stephon Diggs catches the ball or if the field goal kicker makes the kick, it's Josh Allen we're talking about, not Patrick Mahomes. So to anybody saying Allen wasn't good enough, or, even I don't even know that Mahomes necessarily outplayed Josh Allen throw for throw. I thought they were both fantastic. It's splitting hairs if you wanted to debate that. So to anybody that wanted to be critical of Josh Allen, especially you, Des Bryant, wrong analysis on this game, in my opinion. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the battle of the NFC Central from the 90s, right? Bucs at Lions. This one was fun. I mean, the Bucs gave them a ride, a fight for their money in the first half or so. But clearly, as the game went on, the Lions were just a better football team. I think I hinted at earlier, some of the missed opportunities. If the Bucs were going to pull this one off, you can't have Mike Evans letting a ball deflect off his hands, get intercepted on the opening drive, and then Carlton Davis drops the one mistake Jared Goff made all day. drops what with Carlton Davis Jamel Dean with his speed. He's a 4.3 speed type of guy. He catches that. He could have gone the other way. So if you're going to pull off this type of upset, you can't be making those mistakes. My Packers did the exact same thing that we'll talk about. But yeah, I mean, the Lions are they're so impressive, man. And I'm so happy to admit that I was wrong about like their draft and their upside. And yeah, they beat the Bucs, whatever. Like that's not them getting over their upside, in my opinion, but they are here in the conference championship. I think that Rams team that they beat was a really impressive team. And I think they had cleared the level of where the Eagles had gotten to as well. So this isn't entirely lucky, although the Bucs are not the normal caliber of team that you would meet in the divisional round. But I'm extremely happy to see them get to this point, and like their draft is great. Like it is. Jahmyr Gibbs had to be an elite running back, or at least a guy that every week is giving you 1 or 2 explosive plays. He had to be that guy for that pick to be worth it. And he's been that. And then to package that with Sam Laporta, that I totally slept on, did not see him being a top 5 tight end in the NFL as a rookie. It's just incredible. They had this plan. They've got the culture, the kneecap biting, like it all has come together. Jared Goff is playing near flawless football. I mean, he almost threw that pick earlier, but just settled in. And, some of these throws to Amon-Ra St. Brown over the middle of the field, I'm watching it every single week. I'm like, how is he always wide open? It's the same thing, but Ben Johnson does such a good job of using different looks and pre-snaps to create those middle of the field looks. So it's been such an impressive and fun ride for the Lions. And I really think they have a chance against San Francisco, which we'll talk about later in the show.
Yeah, when it comes to Jared Goff, I've always had more, I think, appreciation for Goff than the outside world. And of course, the outside world's huge, so that's hard to say. But he doesn't often get talked about among the elite quarterbacks in the league. And I think that there's a few reasons for that. I mean, number one, he's not as exciting to watch as some of the other quarterbacks. He doesn't run around. In fact, if you make him move, he usually just falls over and throws the ball directly into the ground. So he's got flaws, and he's very much a pocket quarterback. And he got traded by a team that then won the Super Bowl with a different guy, which doesn't exactly work well for your reputation. But I covered a game in 2018 with a very good Vikings defense that I watched Jared Goff right in front of me throw for a perfect passer rating. And since then, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to buy in this guy, because I think the arm strength is maybe even underappreciated. He's a big guy with a giant arm, and the ball comes out super hard from his arm. And I think he actually has a really fast mind. I think he gets through reads and progressions quickly. And sometimes when you throw to a wide open receiver, it looks like, oh, well, he was just wide open, so who cares? But the quarterback has to get there to make that decision, to find that receiver. And he can fit it into areas that a lot of quarterbacks can't, because the dude can just absolutely huck it. And I think the other thing too is, I mean, the way that he's come out in both of these games with the pressure of the Lions, you're carrying a lot from that franchise. They believed in you. You're their guy. They're chanting your name and everything else. And he's come out there and performed like a superstar quarterback under these circumstances where, like if you blow it, you understand what the narrative is going to be about you, right? That you're just not good enough. That's why they traded you away. And he was nothing short of fantastic. Against the Bucs defense is pretty darn good. So I've been very, very impressed with Jared Goff. They stuck with him as their franchise quarterback smartly. And as far as the draft goes, I don't know. I think it's probably evidence that as much as we love positional value and all those things, and they are important, having great players at any position is going to give you an edge. And, a lot of times it's, if you spend the 4th overall pick on Leonard Fournette or something and he busts, then it's really, really bad for you.
Yes.
But, look, if this was Saquon Barkley or something on this team, and, instead of Barkley being trapped in hell in New York, it'd be the same kind of deal. It'd be like, well, you know what? For those years that he's on his rookie contract, this is awesome for them because they have a great player. So whatever, you got to hit on those picks. A lot of times it's just luck, but they've built a complete team now that is playing better defense in my mind than they've played, even, from their defensive line, getting after Stafford in a few key situations, and then, playing better than I thought they would against Baker Mayfield. So they've got themselves a chance, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit more about Gibbs and the draft stuff just from my own perspective here. Two things I want to give them credit for with the foresight. Number one is these like smaller scat backs have like I've this year has changed my opinion on what this type of running back can be in the modern NFL. It's not just Gibbs, it's Devon Achane, who's a third round pick for the Dolphins, and Keaton Mitchell for the Ravens, who has had a hard time staying healthy. But I mean, when he's been out there, he's looked incredible. And I think with the modern NFL, where there's more space, we're spreading guys out. You have these brilliant coordinators, guys like Ben Johnson, guys like Mike McDaniel in Miami. And when you can get these guys in space, get them, really like out of a slingshot, running full speed, they can actually show really good like contact balance and ability to get through tackles and show actually a little bit of a power element to their game. So that was a big thing when they took Gibbs. I was like, the dude's under 200 pounds. He was listed at 199 at Alabama. I'm like, that's going to be really hard to be like a star running back at that size. And my opinion on that has been changed thanks to the Lions in a lot of ways. And then I will say, like, Campbell pick, that would still be relevant criticism of the draft. I'm literally not trying to drag this down, but you look at what Kalijah Kancey was doing on the other side of the ball for the Bucs. He went the pick after Campbell. I mean, man, that could have, it was already a great draft, and I was wrong about the draft, but that pick right there, if you flip that or give him a guy like, give him a corner or something instead of that linebacker, wow, that would be insane. But as for the Bucs, there's going to be a lot of optimism for them heading into next year. And I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here, but I would push back on some hype on the Bucs next year a little bit. They're coming off one of the easiest schedules in the league. They beat one playoff team this year before the playoffs. Their wins: Minnesota, Chicago, New Orleans, Tennessee, the Falcons, the Panthers twice. The Packers is the playoff team they beat, and the Jags. That's a good win. I'll give them the Jags win. But a 9-win team snuck into the playoffs in the worst division in football. Their upcoming free agents are Antoine Winfield Jr., Mike Evans. Baker Mayfield's going to need a contract. Levante David. They need to pay Tristan Wirfs. Dave Canales reportedly is going to be taking the Panthers job. They got a lot of work to do. I'm just going to say that. And you never know when you're going to be back here. You had some of those missed opportunities. I'm not saying they could have gone on a Super Bowl run, but I want to float that out there that they are not a lock to just be better next year, I think. And with the Baker contract, I do think you pay him. I do think it was an impressive revival of his career. But I think the Bucs need to realize, and I think Jason Light, their general manager, who's really good at this, could slow play this a little bit. I think the Bucs have a lot of leverage in this situation. I don't know who's lining up to give Baker really anything north of $25 million. I would slow play it a little bit. 3 years, $75 million, guarantees in the first couple of years. And I don't know, maybe I'm being a Debbie Downer on the Bucs, but that's just kind of my impressions for them, is they just have a lot of work to do. And they're not automatically going to just be back here next year.
I think you're completely right. And I was wondering, watching Baker Mayfield at the end of that game, would it make sense for him to return to Tampa Bay? Because, I mean, I think that agents are pretty good at assessing these things. Players are probably better than they used to. Looking at a team and saying, where are they going? Not where they just were, but where are they going? And if you're Baker Mayfield and you look at that team and go, all right, Atlanta's going to be better because we know they're going to improve in the coaching for sure. And they've got a good roster. Carolina cannot be worse than they were. Right. Carolina probably takes steps forward, even if they're just mildly competitive. Like, this division will get a little bit harder. We're not getting better as a roster. Mike Evans might not even be here. And where do I fit in this? Is the best we're going to do 9-8 again? And, Baker Mayfield, he could look at himself now and say, look, I've proven that I can play on a winning team, win a playoff game. And I want to go do that again, rather than kind of stumbling around with a team that's a little bit lost at sea in the post Brady era. And when we look around, there's some teams that could really use a Baker Mayfield. I mean, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, are you not interested in what Baker could bring to the table with their top-notch wide receivers and the fact that they could win some games with Mason Rudolph? You got to be feeling like, gosh, could I go there? and have a chance. Or, I mean, I know that the division is much tougher, but the Raiders might be a team that's interested in paying a little bit more if they want to be a little more risky. So there's going to be teams out there that need quarterbacks. And I do agree from the comment section saying the NFC South is hot trash. It definitely is, but I don't see the Bucs being so much better than the hot trash. In fact, they weren't even really this year. They got a very impressive win, but I think that also, I mean, it's brought up, but the Vikings and Baker Mayfield would actually make a ton of sense for a bridge type of quarterback if they didn't want to draft one, or even if they did draft one, to have Baker Mayfield play for a year or two. So there are teams out there that I think need a quarterback enough to have options for Baker Mayfield. And even though they did help him revamp his career, he shouldn't be set on that, because if he goes back next year and they go 7-10, Baker Mayfield is not going to get other big opportunities to be a starting quarterback somewhere else. I think he's got to try to be a bit of a front runner here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, especially if they lose Mike Evans. I mean, that was a big part of his resurgence. Mike had an incredible season. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to follow. Excited to talk about lines against the Niners here in a little bit. Let's move on to the Packers game, and I guess we got to talk about it. So here's my thoughts on this. If you told me Saturday morning they took the fight to the Niners, they were right in it, chance at the very end to win the game, I would have said, that's fantastic. I'm so proud of the team. Positive future, all that. Expectations were literally zero for this game. But when you break down all of the missed opportunities in this game, and just like I said earlier with the Bucs, what I said about the Rams last week, there's no guarantee you get back to this thing, even if you have a bright future. The Jags thought they'd be playing next weekend with how their season ended last year. Let me just get into all these missed opportunities. The rain, I think, benefited the Packers in this game. I think they have better offensive line play. I think Jordan Love, despite some of the throws in the fourth quarter, I think overall had a better time throwing in the rain with a better arm talent. Deebo Samuel gets hurt on the first drive of this game that I think completely threw off Kyle Shanahan's game plan, which can be as good as any game plan in the league. He scripts more plays to start the game than ever. 2 of the first plays went right to Deebo on bubble screens. They were successful. And then he gets hurt. So that was a huge, huge factor in this game that doesn't get brought up enough. That's a huge opportunity for the Packers. When they inevitably run into the Niners again next year, Deebo's probably going to be out there. Then you get the dropped interception in the first quarter that would have been 6 from Darnell Savage. That we've talked about how the Packers, and against specifically anybody playing the Cowboys or the Niners, you want to get a lead on these guys. You want to force them into drop back passing situations. Don't let their pass rush tee off on you while you're in a drop back passing situation. So the drop pick was monumental in this game. And then you have the 4th down sneak, where it felt like the Packers were still very much in control of this game, and they had a chance to make it a 2-score lead, get into that game script that's very advantageous. They get the sneak, and the refs take that one away from them. Then you have, of course, the missed field goal at the end of the game that would have made it a 7-point game instead of a 3-point game or a 4-point game. Brutal. I mean, talk about bad kickers. This guy cost the Packers so much this season. It wasn't just this game. He lost them 2 games. I want to say the Broncos game and the Steelers game. Straight up, if you just made kicks onto the scoreboard, they win those games. That would have flipped it. That would have made it so they played the Lions this week instead of the Niners. And then you get here and he loses them this game. Brutal. I mean, the guy can't be back. He's brutal. He was people questioned the pick when they made it. They said there were better kickers available. This guy was not a draftable prospect. I get the process of them having a rookie kicker, but that was a botch from the beginning. Second time in 3 years that predictable special teams blunders have cost the Packers a game against the Niners, because you go back to their loss in 2021, everybody knew they should have fired their special teams coordinator. Block punt touchdown loses them that game, on top of a blocked field goal in that game. And then you have Jordan Love, who is going to bookend this incredible run with the worst quarter of football he's played in 3 months, missing a couple throws that he just missed. I don't know if he thought they were both guys kind of across his body that he thought maybe they were going to sit down, or he just missed it. I don't know, but they were very makeable throws that would have kept the drive alive, probably put the game away. And then, of course, the interception at the end of the game that he's going to get slammed for because there's a lot of Jordan Love haters out there. And you can slam him for it. I think he would embrace and say, that was on me. I can't make that mistake. It's just going to be all about him picking back up where he left off and, building off the success he had and learning from that mistake and not throwing across his body to lose the game at the end. But yeah, it hurts. It hurts as a Packers fan to rehash all these moments. And, I'm sitting there doing tequila shots with my dad. Like, they're going to do this thing. They're going to go to the freaking NFC Championship, beat the Lions, and they blew it. And they have a bright future, but you can't always get back. And it stinks. It stinks.
Let it all out, man. Let it all out. Well, I guess let me try to put a different spin on that because you did lay it out how devastating and frustrating that game was from the Packers' perspective because it wasn't just one interceptable pass by Brock Purdy. I mean, it was several. And also when one of the best offenses in football, and regardless of the Brock Purdy takes, which have just been nauseating to deal with, he was struggling. And when you don't take advantage of the opposing quarterback having a tough time adjusting to the rain, adjusting without his top wide receiver, and just seeming a little bit early in the game, kind of shaken by the magnitude of what was happening and the adjustments that had to be made. And he's throwing to receiver. Like at one point, he's not on the same page with Ray McLeod. And I was like, what? He's in the game as a receiver. Like that's where they suddenly were at. And so they're scrambling a little bit. They're panicking a little bit. And for the Packers to not take advantage of some of those moments is really something that is going to keep them up at night. As far as the kicker goes, there was a study a while back, and I assume it still applies, that drafting a kicker was actually worse than picking one up in undrafted free agency because you feel obligated to keep the guy on the team. You feel obligated to keep him as your kicker if you draft him, and that's what the Packers did. I don't understand drafting kickers. It's worked out occasionally, but way more times they have to wait until the guy is a complete disaster as opposed to just picking up some veteran kicker. Now, maybe they could have argued, hey, look, like we're a young team. We're going all young. We're not going to go out and pick up or bring back Mason Crosby or something at age 57 just to have him around, right? That was Aaron Rodgers' friend. We'll let him go. And we'll go with a young guy who will develop, I guess, over the year. But in the biggest moment, he was not there for them, as was the case many times throughout the season with him. So that is also particularly tough. But I think the thing that you're going to go away with is Jordan Love in his first time there was not able to come up with the big throws at the end, but he is not alone in that. We saw Patrick Mahomes do it. And, that's it though. Think about Josh Allen fumbled away his first playoff game against the Houston Texans. One of the most, you're going to consider Eli Manning to go down as one of the most clutch quarterbacks, right? But go back and look at his start to his playoff career. It was atrocious. Like a lot of young starting quarterbacks in the playoffs, even CJ Stroud and his first performance was debated. He didn't play well at all against Baltimore. These guys will be back, and I think it's going to be a lot of playoff appearances for Jordan Love, but he has to understand in that moment that if you run out of bounds, if you throw the ball away, like trying to be a hero sometimes, especially when there's lots of times left, you have to understand situation, circumstance, risk versus reward. And I think he started to really get that in the second half of the season, but then sort of reverted at the very worst time. But I look at this team as overachieving by being as close as they were by a mile from where they were in the middle of the season. And through 3 quarters of that game, Jordan Love looks like a superstar quarterback. There's 5 throws where you're like, oh my gosh, right? I mean, so that I don't think that's going anywhere. I don't think the team is going anywhere. They've got tons of young weapons that they're going to continue to develop. I think they can improve on what they have defensively. They have an offensive line to work with. So, I mean, this is a team that's going to be dangerous for the future. But as far as one game in a bubble, there were multiple kicks to the groin there for people like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we live in a world where everybody just remembers how the game ends. And like you said, Love, I thought for 3 quarters, moment was not too big, made some huge throws. The one to Dobbs was just beautiful. So that's the hope, is that the Packers can just take this in stride, use it as motivation to get better over the offseason. And they got plenty of resources to be better. I do want to shout out Aaron Jones because I personally have been very critical of his playoff performances in years past. He's had fumbles. He just hasn't been productive. The last time they lost to the Niners, he had a play where, I don't know if you remember, right before half, Rodgers rolling out, hits him down the sideline, and then he cuts back for some reason when if he stays out, he probably scores a touchdown that would have been the difference in that game, or runs out of bounds and stops the clock instead of them burning like 30 seconds off. So Aaron Jones had a big fumble against the Bucs in that loss. Like, he has really not been good in the playoffs, but man, he has really been electric for them lately. And I hope he's back. And I didn't think I would say that coming into the year for Aaron Jones. For San Fran, they had to dig this one out. We've talked about how this is their year. This is a big window for them with the way their contracts and their superstar players are in line. So I was actually impressed with Brock Purdy's ability to kind of navigate through this game, finished with the game-winning drive. The Purdy discourse, I don't even really think we need to get into it, but it is just ridiculous. Everybody needs to relax. No one's saying the dude's Patrick Mahomes, right? But yeah, we'll break down the Niners against the Lions. I didn't really have too much to take away from their side of things. They should have won this game by a lot more than they did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that with the Brock Purdy thing, it seems like a lot of people decided really early on where they were going to stand on Brock Purdy and just wait until there's ever moments of not being Patrick Mahomes, which it's a really cheap game that everybody plays with quarterbacks, because unless you are Mahomes, you always have these down moments. And we've done this for many years with quarterbacks. It's like, if you're not Brady or Manning, then you're probably going to have some ups and downs throughout your career, through a season. And with every down game, it's like, told you so, told you so, told you so. And there was a lot of that in this game. Well, told you so. He's not the quarterback that you guys thought he was. And I went back and looked and found multiple playoff wins from Tom Brady. And I'm not saying he's Brady, where he had a 55 quarterback rating and he came up with a game-winning drive. And early in Brady's career, they would say, oh, see, he's not that good. It's the defense. Mm-hmm. Late in the career, it'd be like, wow, even when he plays bad, he's still clutch. And we just move the goalposts all over the place until we just drive ourselves insane. The reality is that Brock Purdy has been a tremendous fit for this team. And throwing to open receivers, guys making yards after catch, a screen game that nets them 8 yards per pass attempt. Like, he doesn't have to apologize for that. If you win with a great team, you don't have to give the ring back. And the reality is, with Brock Purdy, he fits super well with what they do. And in the biggest moment, he was able to make a great throw that ended up winning that game and make a play with his legs that was huge toward winning that game. And that's what was necessary. And I don't know if he's going to win the Super Bowl or not. If he's playing against Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, I'll probably pick them instead of him because they're the best. But it's very frustrating that the minute there's like some things going wrong for a quarterback, we have to jump out and say, oh, see, I knew in the draft he wasn't any good. Like, congratulations. I don't know. What do you want? Like, there's only one dude who plays great all the time. And even then, he has some bad moments throughout the season. So I think that Purdy, if Deebo Samuel is back, gives them enough with a chance to go win the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. That's probably made it. Kittle was freaking dime early in the game. Like, that's a big elite play that he made on that one. All right. Texans at Ravens. Left this one for last because I think there's the least to say about it. But I will say that Baltimore just continues to blow me away. I mean, they're just killing teams. I have bet against them, whether it's to like not cover their double-digit spreads or to lose some of these big games that they've had. I've bet against them like 4 weeks in a row and I'm done. Like, they have burned me. I've seen them as a really good team, but they are just an elite team. Like, team, emphasis on that word. Like, they're so versatile, strong in every regard. They're incredibly well coached. Lamar Jackson has reached a level. Like, I've always, well, I can't say I always liked Lamar, but since he became a great player, I've liked Lamar. He's playing at a level that it's just not computing in my brain yet, that he's no longer like 7th best quarterback in the NFL, Lamar Jackson. He's now like 2nd best quarterback in the NFL. Like maybe that's what's not computing for me. But yeah, they're just, they remind me of like, I don't watch a lot of NBA, but I noticed it last year watching the Denver Nuggets. I was like, this team, they just have this rare energy about them. And they went on and won the whole thing. And I see a lot of that with the Ravens, where it's a bunch of, like, it's a million good pieces, not necessarily these elite game wreckers up and down. And then you have your Jokic, you have your Jokic on top of that being Lamar. I do want to say Lamar, I noticed him out there, and I don't know that I've ever seen him do this. He's out there like passionately yelling at his receivers over like small stuff. And I've always defended like Rodgers for doing this, Brady for doing this, Big Ben for doing this, Peyton Manning for doing this, like all the best, like truly elite quarterbacks of all time. They yell at their wide receivers because I think that exudes a confidence in what you're seeing on the field, a confidence that you're right. And then it's competitive passion too. And it's just, to see that from Lamar, like, come on, we gotta get there. We're not messing around this year in a game where, they're playing the Houston Texans. And I think they were winning and in control at that point. So I really like to see that from Lamar. And yeah, man, there's just not a whole lot to say about how good they're playing right now.
So I'm really enjoying it personally because I was a Lamar Jackson is QB1 at Louisville truther, and I also thought Josh Rosen was QB2. So I'm not trying to say that I had any incredible insight into the quarterbacks and how they would turn out that year in the draft, but I kind of became obsessed during that draft with watching Lamar play and watching every game that I could, because his supporting cast was not good. And I thought he was better at throwing the football than he was getting credit for. And then the whole combine thing and his mom's representing him and everything else. And there's just there, and then some of the playoff failures, there's always been reason, even through this last offseason with his business partner is calling teams about trades and everything else. Like, there's always been some reason kind of not to give Lamar his full credit. And he was dealing with an offensive coordinator that I think doesn't really understand the pass game as well as some of the best in Greg Roman. So that change was absolutely vital. And also to give him the wide receivers that he needed. He always had a great tight end, but he has never had truly great wide receivers. And Zay Flowers, I don't think he's on the level of like a Justin Jefferson or a Tyreek Hill, but he's very, very good. And he can distribute the ball to a lot of different places. Odell Beckham can play now. I think he's going to get Mark Andrews back this week. So you have the culmination of a maturity of a quarterback who now stays in the pocket first and then decides in the right times to run. And also an offensive system that was built around great passing concepts to get receivers open, a tremendous decision to pick a undersized wide receiver who can get open and create separation, as a playmaker that's a perfect fit for Lamar Jackson. So it's everything coming together around him. They also have a good running game to work off of, which I think is in part because Jackson is so good at running that they have to pay attention to him. And on the defensive side, they have been so phenomenal as a franchise of just picking up that one more piece. And that one more piece is Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, for years, I feel like Jadeveon Clowney has been this weird offseason thing. And then, oh, what team did he go to? Did it work out? I don't know. Like, he was in Cleveland. Who kind of cares? And he is
Titans,
on his game now.
Seahawks.
Yeah, right. Like, just that's who Clowney's with this year, and he'd be okay and so forth. But he's just been such a great fit there. So they've built it really smartly with some sort of final pieces, and then of course you got to hit in the draft as they did with Kyle Hamilton. So complete team. But for me to see the growth of Lamar Jackson all the way through this entire thing, to be on the precipice of having a chance to go to a Super Bowl, which is the reflective to me of his talent and where he ranks among quarterbacks, I think is very cool.
Absolutely. And as for Houston, this is the loss that, you look at it, you say, all right, we got overwhelmed. We weren't there yet. It's not like the Packers where it's like, oh, you were right there and you blew it. Like Houston, I think, especially you look at kind of how the way the defense fell apart in the second half, and it's DeAndre Houston Carson and random players out there missing tackles, and just the whole team, like the depth and the width of the team, just wasn't quite there yet. So, Houston was a team that was supposed to have potentially the number one pick in the draft coming into the year. You look at Stroud and how he's playing. I think I feel even more confident about Stroud than I do about Love. To just like I said, there's still a tiny, as much of a Love guy I am, there's still like a tiny piece of me. It's like, yeah, he could fall off. I just think Stroud's been so consistent from start to finish that you have so much confidence in what he's going to do for that organization. So, they ran out of gas. They fought early, but just really didn't have any answers to this juggernaut. I don't have anything else on that one. You want to get
Sucks to
into
be in the
previewing?
AFC. And that's all I would say is
Yeah,
it
it does.
just sucks to be in the AFC. I mean, the Houston Texans are set up to be a great team going forward. They could be what the Ravens are someday. They're going to have the cap space to work with. They're going to be a destination, I think, because I think players follow winning and money. And that looks like a team that's going to be really fun and on the rise. But it's going to be a battle. Those teams at the top, Buffalo might slide back a little bit. Somebody else will slide into their spot. But I'm really interested to see how they approach this offseason and whether they go into the offseason saying, you know what, free agency like Christian Wilkins or Brian Burns or whatever defensive players they can get. Let's add another wide receiver, add another offensive lineman. Like they could go in and take that approach and be a Super Bowl contender next season.
Absolutely. All right, should we get into previewing a little bit here? Let's start with the AFC, with the Chiefs-Ravens game. 3.5-point spread for the Ravens in this one, which I just said, this team's been murdering teams, and that's a lot of respect for the Chiefs based on how the Ravens are playing right now. I mean, we're just a couple weeks removed of them decimating the Niners, decimating the Dolphins. So this is like the market saying, all right, the Chiefs are back. Mahomes is going to put this thing on his back, and this thing is going to be ultra competitive. And I tend to agree just because of everything we said about the Chiefs earlier and how amazing Mahomes is. I guess there's one big thing I'm looking for in this game, and it's going to be the Ravens front against the Chiefs offensive line, because the Chiefs against the Bills had all day to throw. They were running the daylights out of the football. Meanwhile, last week, the Ravens were dominating Stroud up front. I forgot to mention that. He had no time to throw in this game. They had no run game to speak of at all. I don't even know if they had positive rushing yards on the day for Houston. I felt like they were going backwards more than they were going forward. But this is a whole different test with the Chiefs offensive line, where I would say the strength, at least from a pass rushing perspective for the Ravens, is Justin Madubuike and their stunts with the schemes that they run. And the Chiefs are going to be really well equipped to handle that, because I don't know that Madubuike is going to, come out and dominate. Maybe he will. Maybe he is just that good. I would argue he's not a guy that you can expect to come out and dominate Joe Tooney and those guys like he did against Juice Scruggs and the company in Houston last week. But especially when you talk about the Ravens probably being the best team at blitzing and stunting to manufacture pass rush. I know you mentioned Clowney's been pretty good, but they don't have a Myles Garrett or any of these elite pass rushers that you can really just say, we're going to line you up, get you a one-on-one, and expect you to win. That pass rush has been so effective in large part because of McDonald's scheme there. And the Chiefs might be the best team equipped to handle that, because you have Mahomes, who's excellent against the blitz to begin with, maybe the best quarterback in the league against the blitz right now. Andy Reid, who's got years of experience knowing when it's coming, how to attack it. But the other thing is, when you're running these cross stunts and moving guys left to right, the danger of that is you're going to open up a lot of escape lanes, and it's tough to maintain the kind of contain on the quarterback. And that's a big focal point when you play Mahomes, is not to let him out of the pocket where he can scramble and beat you on the move. So it's going to be a completely different matchup. That's going to be the biggest thing I'm watching in this game is how the line of scrimmage works. And then, of course, the run game for the Chiefs, that was such a big part of their win against the Bills. And how does that look going against this Ravens front that I think I tweeted it. I was like, death, taxes, and you going absolutely nowhere against the Ravens defense trying to run the ball in the playoffs. This feels like one of these classic Ravens, early 2000s defenses where you weren't going to run the ball on them. So that to me is where this game is going to be won or lost.
Yeah, I think the way that the Ravens defense is built, they have a couple of guys at the linebacker position that would make me think it would be one of the hardest matchups for the Kansas City Chiefs, because what they love to do is they love to run receivers across the middle of the field, get the ball in their hands. They love, obviously, to throw the ball to Travis Kelce. And of course, they're very clever in doing so. And there's no team that has ever just been able to stop all of Andy Reid's passing attack. But the linebackers, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, have just been so good for Baltimore. I mean, Roquan Smith, that trade, it's one of those where you go, and there's a lot of this throughout the playoffs, where it's like, is that the most efficient thing to do? Is it most efficient to draft Jahmyr Gibbs? Is it the most efficient to trade for Roquan Smith? I don't know, but that team is all in. And it's great players. How many great players can you stack up? And I feel like Queen, especially, has also developed into a great player. Having those guys against this team is a mismatch, I think, in the favor of the Baltimore Ravens, that very few teams have two linebackers that can really do this. So those guys against Mahomes, I think, are a key matchup. And on the other side, Chris Jones, once again, total game wrecker against Buffalo. Yep. The biggest moment there where, yes, he should have dumped it down to, Stephon Diggs. But if Chris Jones isn't right in the face of Josh Allen, he probably throws a touchdown there. That's such a big deal for Lamar Jackson, facing pressure when he's trying to stay in the pocket. How much can you kind of make him try to be an escape artist or speed him up and kind of, because that's where he's been so good to me, is he's been very patient and then decides when it's the right time to run. Can you kind of make him decide to run earlier than he needs to? Then you get frustrated. And there's also, I think, for Baltimore, just in terms of less roster X's and O's, there is a lot of pressure on Baltimore and none on Kansas City. Kansas City's not supposed to be here. They know that this was a tough year for them. And also, they've got rings. Andy's got rings. Pat's got rings. Mahomes is just like, oh, I'm just playing the villain. I'm just doing whatever here. Like, they come in loose and like, let's play. Where Baltimore is, hey, this is your shot. Like, this is the best team. This is the best team you'll ever have. It is very, very difficult to build a roster this complete, as you mentioned, from top to bottom. They are fantastic. When will you ever have a better shot than this, where you destroyed a team like the San Francisco 49ers in the regular season? You ran the Houston Texans out of the building. They won't be worn down either. And I think this is a factor in playoff games, that the Chiefs played an extremely stressful game in a hard environment a week ago, and Baltimore was just vibing by the end of that. Like, I don't know, we're just up 30 points or 20 points. Who cares? And that's, I think, really different. So I think there's like some of those factors that kind of go into it too, is essentially, does Lamar come out on point? He didn't really against the Texans, and that was fine, but it's not going to be fine if you don't come out on point probably against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah. I mean, Lamar's just got to keep it up, keep playing like this. The chat's saying Joe Thuney's out, and I didn't realize that. That's a huge break for the Ravens. Is that true? Is he fully out? Because that's a huge difference. If you all of a sudden are putting Nick Allegretti in there, who I do know came in at the end of the game. So as far as picking this game, 3.5 points, I did want to get our loose picks against the spread. I don't know how we're doing. I haven't been keeping track. I know I haven't been picking these playoff games all that accurately. Did you find anything on Thuney?
Yeah, so says he's got a pectoral strain, status up in the air. So not ruled out yet, but he's not going to be at 100% if he's got a pec strain. That sounds terrible for an offensive lineman.
Yeah, that's tough. I think the Ravens cover this, Matthew. If now knowing that Thuney injury and everything I said about how important that part of the game is going to be for these guys, I don't know if the Chiefs are going to have a ton of success running the ball. I think they can get after Mahomes, win that matchup right there at the left guard. And I think the Ravens offense is just, they have so many answers right now. I think, they win this one 27-21.
How do you ever pick against Patrick Mahomes? But I think I want to do it as well. Yeah. But how do you do that, right? Like, how do you say, I don't know, I think someone else will win when he's just found a way so many times.
I know.
And when he's been playing the best football of his entire season recently, like, do I really believe that a great defense can slow him down? Do I really believe? I mean, the Bills did a wonderful job of keeping him off the field. That didn't matter either. He still found a way. But yeah, I guess I'm going to have to say that I think that the Ravens will win this because they are not just the best team in football as far as roster strength, but kind of by far. And this is Lamar's moment to get to his Super Bowl and solidify himself as truly one of the great quarterbacks of this entire era. But would I be surprised if Patrick Mahomes ends up going, I don't know, 21 for 25 with 300 yards and wins the game? I wouldn't, but I'm going to pick Baltimore as well.
Yeah, absolutely. My wife's in the chat wants it to be well known that she picked all 4 games correctly this weekend, and it is true.
Oh.
I can confirm.
Was
all
she
right.
watching at the end when I said watch out for the Bills kicker? Last week?
She might have been. I'll have to ask her and let you know.
If that helped her pick the game correctly, you're welcome.
All right, Detroit at San Francisco. 7-point spread in this one in favor of the Niners in this one. Another big injury in this game. Deebo Samuel is, I think, going to be a huge factor in this one. I didn't talk enough about this in that Packers game where he just is the heartbeat of their system because he lines up everywhere and he is like the biggest factor. You always talk about like Kyle Shanahan will run one play without even a care in the world of like what the results of the play are. But the idea is to see how the defense responds to emotion or how they respond to a certain thing. I think Debo is the biggest piece to that. And then when he's in as well, he can move him and McCaffrey around interchangeably. Whereas when he's out, there's no one else to be interchangeable with McCaffrey there. So I really think him being able to go, it is a shoulder injury, so it shouldn't impact like his mobility and ability to be that type of an athlete and an impact there. So that's a huge one because I think Detroit can hang in this game if Debo's not playing. I really do. I think everything they're doing offensively right now, it's impossible to bet against it. It feels like they're a lock to get at least 24 points every week. And then I actually think for all of Detroit's defensive issues, this is the style of team that they are set up to play well. It's, all of these defenders on the back end that are like high energy, run and chase, tackle guys. Like they like to get in the mud and defend the run and, take down play action and chase down Debo to the flat and stop Christian McCaffrey. It's actually teams more like the Bucs that I'm worried about them, where it's like, can you get after the quarterback in a drop back situation and cover on the back end? So I actually like the way Detroit matches up in this game. If Debo's out, I certainly would not bet on the Niners to even cover the 7 points there. If Debo is playing, I do think this offense is a different animal. And also like if it's not raining, I think Brock Purdy can play a lot better against this Lions defense as well. So I know a lot of the momentum is going to be on Detroit here, but there is a good reason as well why San Francisco is a 7-point favorite. Where are you going on this one?
Debo just makes everything so easy. He is the easy button for that team, and it's so much harder without him because he's the guy where you could throw the ball 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, you get 20. You could throw it 3 yards in front of the line of scrimmage, you get 20. I mean, it just is, it makes it so much more difficult when you have to push the ball down the field to get explosive plays rather than just giving it to. Isn't it funny that there are some receivers in the league who are basically like Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith, except for that's the position they play now, like Tyreek Hill and Deebo Samuel.
Yep.
These guys, they just make life great for quarterbacks. So his status is huge in this game. I don't really trust either defensive scheme. I think the 49ers have a ton of talent, but there are a lot of times schematically throughout the season where I was like, why does it seem like with all the gifts they have and the great D line that they have, that there's so many open receivers against this team? And the Lions have one of the best offensive coordinators in the league. I feel like I might want to go for an upset here. As much as I was just defending Brock Purdy earlier in the show for it not being fair to just take one game and be like, see, told you he's not that good.
Yeah.
But it's really for me, the way that, so the Packers through 3 quarters move the ball very easily against San Francisco in big parts of that game, especially on the ground. That should be really disturbing to San Francisco, because if you could do that with Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery, I mean, you could really control the ball for a long period of time. And one thing that I think Goff has been very good at is taking like a 9-yard pass, just drop back, hit the back foot, balls out, 9-yard completion, next play. And they love those 7-minute drives. And I think that could force San Francisco into a position to be a little bit anxious and Brock Purdy to do a little too much. I don't think there's anything really to that stat of, hey, when the 49ers are down, they don't come back and win. Like, it seems like one of those where you go to Pro Football Reference and try to squeeze it until it fits. At the same time, I do think that if the 49ers get down and it becomes Brock Purdy, you got to put it all on your shoulders and bring us back, that might be a difficult position to be for them. So I mean, I think it's probably not the most logical pick to say Detroit, but I think I want to say Detroit based on the way that they've been playing. And also, maybe the path here was a little bit easier than it was for San Francisco. The last game they played very, very physical against the Packers, very difficult and stressful game. So I don't know. It's, when we get to this point, it's kind of flip a coin in a lot of ways. All great teams, but I'm going to say I think Detroit ends up going to the Super Bowl. It's going to be wild.
All right. I mean, it's a win-win situation because no one's going to be mad at you for picking Detroit. Everybody loves the Lions. So if you're wrong, it's fine, and if you're right, you look like a genius. So you're playing this the right way. Definitely, I think. I mean, these two quarterbacks is going to come down to who avoids the mistakes in this game. I mean, I think that's going to be a huge cliche that really matters in this one. You mentioned, you don't know if Brock Purdy will come back and win from behind. Well, Jared Goff, I don't know if I'd fully trust him in a come from behind situation. He had that opportunity against Dallas a few weeks ago, and it was 50-50. One time he threw the ball right to a flat defender that should have ended the game. Ended up getting the ball back. He had a clutch drive. So, it's kind of an interesting matchup between two, I would just say, I don't want to call them mid-tier quarterbacks, but non-elite quarterbacks. Whereas you look at the other game and it's Lamar and Patrick Mahomes. But it's two quarterbacks that are always going to have their haters. And one of these guys is going to come up short, and you can already see it's probably going to be a pick in the fourth quarter. And it's going to shape the narrative on who that quarterback is for the rest of his life. Just the world we live in. But I like the Lions pick. I would say I would go Niners win, Lions cover, and play it, safe that way. But I do still, Niners were my pick to go to the Super Bowl coming in. And even if Debo's out, still don't think they have enough, but that is a huge one where if Debo's out, I'm like, this thing really is neck and neck. So should be a fun one. I don't know. Do you want to talk about Brian Callahan, or do you want to get out of here?
Do you want me to call something super random like I did with the Bills kicker last week? Maybe I should try for again. We'll see. Am I a prophet from the future, or did I just come from Buffalo and know that they would have a kicker miss wide right? How about this? Second or third string tight end Brock Wright to score a touchdown, to score a key touchdown. Keep an eye on that. There is your mythical from the future call that they will somehow find a way to have him make a difference in this game. That's what I'm being told.
If we're picking backup tight ends to score touchdowns, I might as well throw out my boy Charlie Kolar to score a touchdown for the Ravens this week.
Okay, apparently Brock Wright is out for the game. Sorry, that really didn't work out very well. Oh no. All right, who's the other guy? Who's the backup? Somebody give me somebody. I just went to their roster and picked a guy I didn't recognize. Sorry, guys.
Let me see if I can get it. It's a tight end. Is it Mitchell?
Mitchell. Oh, James Mitchell. Yeah, he had a catch against the Vikings.
Got it.
Sorry, guys. James Mitchell, I meant.
All right, James Mitchell's going to get a touchdown. Stepping up.
There you go.
Loaded to tight end 2 this week. All right. Yeah, that
I literally
is
just
gonna
picked a
do it.
random player. I'm sorry.
Mitchell's also on IR.
that gag. What? Who's playing? Whoever the backup freaking tight end is for the Lions is going to score. Is it Dan Skipper?
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's actually interesting. They don't really have like a 12 personnel
I guess
to
not.
go to this week. That's actually kind of
Okay.
a big deal. Like I think
Is
that's a good
Donovan
personnel.
Peoples-Jones playing? Oh, they signed
Yeah,
Ertz?
can he play tight end?
Oh, did they sign Zach Ertz? Did that
Oh,
did that happen?
They did sign Zach Ertz.
Okay,
So
let's
yeah,
do
Zach
it then.
Ertz.
Let's do it. Zach Ertz, the cover of my book, by the way, right behind me.
Yeah, there you go. That'd be fitting.
There you go. Zach Ertz. That's the guy.
All right. I love it. I love it.
He'll score.
All right, everybody. That was another amazing show. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Peace out.